You are poor because you are a good person. Not poor in the sense that you have nothing, poor in the sense that you have less than you should, less than your effort deserves, less than your intelligence warrants. And you have been told your entire life exactly why that is acceptable. Someone sold you a contract, an invisible agreement with society that says be honest, be humble, be generous, play fair, wait your turn, and the system will take care of you. Work hard enough, stay ethical enough, be liked enough, and wealth will find you. It will not find you. That contract was written by people who needed you compliant, not wealthy. 5 centuries ago, Machiavelli wrote something the world has been trying to unlearn ever since: that virtue and power operate by completely different rules. It was enforced through social pressure, through religion, through the school system, through every cultural message that told you ambition is greed, that strategy is manipulation, and that wanting more than your share makes you a bad person. And here is the darkest part of it. You believed them, not because you are stupid, because the conditioning started before you could evaluate it. By the time you were old enough to question it, it had already become your identity. Carl Jung spent decades studying what he called the shadow, the part of your psyche containing everything you were told to suppress: your drive for power, your strategic instincts, your refusal to be taken advantage of, your desire to win. Jung drew heavily from Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy of the will to power, recognizing that the shadow is 90% pure gold. The very things you were trained to apologize for are the compressed energy of your potential. Meanwhile, a 500-year-old manuscript that the Catholic Church banned, that Napoleon carried in his pocket all the way to Waterloo, that Stalin personally annotated, has been sitting in plain sight, telling anyone willing to read it exactly how power actually moves. Money does not care about your virtue. It does not care if you are kind to strangers or if you play fair. Money is energy, and energy flows toward leverage, toward control, toward those who understand human nature clearly enough to stop being governed by their own. What follows covers 9 documented psychological mechanisms verified by Nobel Prize-winning research, cross-cultural behavioral studies, and centuries of political history that keep ordinary people poor, obedient, and predictable. These 9 traps are cognitive biases, systematic errors in decision-making documented across decades of research. And the people running these mechanisms on you are not special. They are not smarter than you. They simply stopped pretending the contract was real. Let us begin. Part 1. The Trap of Generosity. Why being nice is financially suicidal. In 1469, a man was born in Renaissance Florence, the financial and cultural capital of 15th century Europe, who would spend his entire career watching powerful men destroy themselves, not through cruelty, not through stupidity, but through the compulsive need to appear good. His name was Niccolò Machiavelli, and after years as a Florentine diplomat, he wrote a manuscript in 1513 that would shake Western civilization. In The Prince, his words were direct. The fact is that a man who wants to act virtuously in every way necessarily comes to grief among so many who are not virtuous. He is not saying be evil. He is saying that in a world where not everyone plays by the rules of virtue, the person who insists on playing by those rules alone will lose every time, without exception. And here is what Jung would add 5 centuries later. The reason this trap is so powerful, the reason people fall into it despite knowing better, is that the desire to be seen as generous lives in the conscious mind, while the actual cost lives in the shadow, invisible and unexamined. You feel the warmth of giving. You never fully register what that giving compounds into over time. Modern research confirms both men. A 2022 study with 850 participants, found that placing people in a monetary context, simply making them think about money, reduces generosity, because the instinct to protect resources is biological, and yet up to 85% of charitable donations in America are given reactively, not from deep conviction, but as a direct response to being solicited. That is not generosity, that is social compliance, wearing the costume of virtue. Neuroscientists studied a Brazilian man who suffered damage to the subgenual region of his brain and began giving compulsively. He could not stop. His finances collapsed, and he gave to strangers while his loved ones suffered. Scientists studying pathological givers found something most people are too polite to say out loud. Mathematically, within just a few generations, selfish people outcompete generous ones. Evolution did not design you to be endlessly generous. It designed you to survive. Thomas Stanley and William Danko spent over 2 decades studying actual millionaires, and what they found should end the argument. High-income professionals, doctors, lawyers, dentists, are twice as likely to be under-accumulators of wealth as they are to be genuinely rich. Why? Because they spend their income performing success. Stanley and Danko put it plainly: allocating time and money in the pursuit of looking superior often produces inferior economic achievement. Being financially nice is not a strategy, it is a leak, and for most people, it is a catastrophic one. Part 2. The free lunch debt. How free keeps you enslaved? Here is a word that has enslaved more people than any prison in history. Free. Robert Greene published The 48 Laws of Power in 1998, and it went on to sell over 1.2 million copies in the United States alone, got translated into 24 languages, and was banned by several US prisons. Law 40 is blunt. Despise the free lunch. Greene was building on what the anthropologist Marcel Mauss had identified decades earlier. Accepting a gift creates a moral obligation, and the recipient is now indebted. Refusing the gift is, in Mauss's words, a refusal of friendship and intercourse. You cannot easily say no, and that is exactly the point. Now enter Robert Cialdini, a social psychologist who spent 3 years working undercover inside used car dealerships, fundraising organizations, and telemarketing firms, observing real-world influence in action. His book, Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion, published in 1984, has sold over 5 million copies and been translated into 41 languages, and he is currently the most cited living social psychologist in the world. Cialdini identified 6 mechanical principles of compliance, and the first and most powerful is reciprocity. The numbers are staggering. Customers were 42% more likely to make a purchase after receiving a free piece of chocolate when entering a store, and grocery store product samples drove sales by as much as 20%. The mechanism is precise. Gratitude increases dopamine, chemically altering your brain state toward the person who gave you something, even something you did not ask for. You feel indebted. You want to balance the scales. But here is where Cialdini's research gets devastating, and it is not the chocolate study. In one experiment, 4 times as many homeowners agreed to erect an unsightly billboard on their lawn, simply because 10 days earlier, they had agreed to put a small postcard in their window. A small initial yes locks in a larger yes later. This demonstrates what Cialdini called social proof, the principle that people look to the behavior of others to guide their own actions. That is how free trials become subscriptions, free consultations become retainers, and free samples become loyalties. Cialdini was hired to advise the Barack Obama presidential campaign in 2012, and he did not advise them on policy. He advised them on compliance architecture. The most powerful people in the world take this science seriously, and the question is whether you do. Jung's shadow dynamic runs underneath all of this. The reason free things work so effectively is that the socially trained part of you, the part that desperately wants to be seen as grateful, polite, and non-confrontational, cannot easily compute the real cost of acceptance. That calculation happens in the shadow, and most people never do it. Green put it plainly: never be seduced by the appearance of someone else's generosity without asking what they want in return, because in every game of power, there is no free lunch. There is only a lunch where someone else is choosing when you pay. Part 3. The Producer's Trance. Escaping the consumer sheep pen. In 1899, an economist named Thorstein Veblen published a book that should have ended the argument before it started. The Theory of the Leisure Class, written during the Gilded Age of Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Vanderbilt, documented what Veblen called conspicuous consumption, useless expenditure whose only purpose was to signal status. His conclusion was devastating. It is the middle class and working class who are usefully employed in productive occupations that support the whole of society, while the wealthy, in many cases, were simply performing wealth. Veblen also identified what is now called the Veblen effect, a price distortion, where higher prices actually increase consumer demand, not because the product is better, but because buyers believe owning expensive things will make them appear sophisticated. The price itself becomes the point. That was 1899, more than 125 years ago. Here is where things stand today. Consumer spending accounts for approximately 2/3 of all US economic activity. As of June 2025, Americans collectively owe nearly $18 trillion in consumer debt, a number still rising, with the average household carrying around $100,000 in debt, and credit card interest rates now exceeding 20%. More than half of Gen Z reports that their lifestyle costs more than they earn, and 1 in 3 Americans admits to making a purchase in the last year that they knew at the time they could not afford. They knew and bought it anyway. The personal savings rate as of December 2024 sat at 3.8%, below the 20-year average of 5.9%. Among the bottom 20% of earners, only 30.9% saved anything at all, while among the top 10%, 83.7% saved something. The gap is not just income. The gap is behavior. Veblen described conspicuous consumers as locked in a cycle of labor and debt, in pursuit of possessions whose only purpose is to impress others, and which they lack either the time or interest to enjoy. He wrote that in 1899, and he was describing your Instagram feed. Contrast all of this with what Stanley and Danko found when they studied the genuinely wealthy. Between 80 and 85% of millionaires are first-generation and self-made, running what Stanley and Danko called dull but stable businesses, boring industries, quiet operations, no signaling of production. They simply produced. The sheep and the shepherd are not enemies. The shepherd needs the sheep. What the shepherd does not need is for the sheep to figure out the arrangement. Part 4. Emotional Alchemy. Overriding loss aversion with strategic aggression. In 1979, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky published a paper that today holds the title of most cited paper in all of economics, confirmed in a 2019 global replication study across 19 countries and 13 languages. Prospect theory. This groundbreaking work in behavior economics, the field that earned Kahneman the Nobel Prize, revealed the central finding: losing something hurts approximately twice as much as gaining the same amount feels good, with Kahneman and Tversky estimating the coefficient at 2.25. A loss does not feel like a loss. It feels like 2.5 gains running in reverse. Their experiments showed exactly what that asymmetry produces. Starting with $1,000, most people chose a guaranteed $500 more over a 50-50 shot at $1,000 more. Safe, but those same people, starting with $2,000 and facing a certain loss of $500 versus a 50-50 chance of losing $1,000, chose to gamble. Both scenarios are mathematically identical. People chose oppositely based on framing alone. When a loss is possible, humans become gamblers. When a gain is possible, humans become cowards. Kahneman also found that approximately 96% of daily thinking runs through System 1, fast, automatic, unconscious, emotional, with only 4% running through System 2. Around 35,000 decisions get made every day, and System 1 is the machine that loss aversion runs on. Now enter Nassim Nicholas Taleb, a former derivatives trader turned mathematical philosopher. His 2007 book, The Black Swan, spent 36 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, and the Sunday Times called it one of the 12 most influential books since World War II. Kahneman himself said that Taleb changed the way many people think about uncertainty, particularly in financial markets. In 2012, Taleb published Anti-Fragile, built around a thesis most people miss entirely. Most people and institutions are fragile. They break under stress. A few are resilient. They survive. But the truly powerful are anti-fragile. They actually benefit from volatility, disruption, and chaos. The goal is not to avoid the storm. The goal is to be the person who gets stronger when the storm hits. His practical answer to this is what he calls the barbell strategy. 90% of holdings in ultra-safe, low-risk positions, with maximum risk taken on the remaining 10%. This structure caps your downside at a known, survivable loss while keeping your upside theoretically unlimited. You are not gambling. You are engineering asymmetry, drawing from Stoicism, the ancient philosophy that taught emotional discipline in the face of uncertainty. Taleb put it directly: fragility implies more to lose than to gain, while anti-fragility implies more to gain than to lose. Loss aversion also explains things most people never connect. Organ donation rates are dramatically higher in countries with opt-out policies than opt-in ones. Taxi drivers quit on their most profitable days after hitting a mental income target because the prospect of that number falling feels worse than earning more feels good. Consumer demand reacts more strongly to price increases than decreases. The people who understand this are not playing by different rules. They are playing the same game with the lights on. Part 5. Stealth Wealth. The Asymmetry of Silence. According to the Charles Schwab 2024 Modern Wealth Survey, the average American believes $2.5 million constitutes wealth. In San Francisco, that number rises to $5.1 million. The top 1% of American households hold an average net worth of approximately $35.5 million. One person in 1,000. The top 0.1% holds an average of $158.6 million per household. And these numbers are almost certainly underestimates. Research drawn from the Panama Papers and Swiss Leaks investigations found that ultra-high net worth individuals, those with over $45 million, are 10 times more likely to hide assets than the average citizen, avoiding roughly 30% of personal income and wealth taxes. The top 0.01% are 13 times more likely to hold hidden accounts than households just below them in the top 1%. The defining characteristic of genuine wealth at the highest levels is not display, it is concealment. Warren Buffett's net worth exceeds $100 billion, and he still lives in the same house in Omaha, Nebraska, that he bought in 1958 for $31,500. His car upgrade in 2014 was a Cadillac XTS for approximately $45,000. His stated position: not interested in cars, not interested in making people envious. His longtime business partner, Charlie Munger, practiced the same discipline, accumulating billions while living modestly and focusing on mental models rather than material displays. Taleb's concept of skin in the game reinforces this from a different angle. In his 2018 book, he describes what he calls the Bob Rubin trade. Robert Rubin, a highly paid director at Citigroup, collected hundreds of millions in compensation and paid zero financial penalty when Citigroup required a taxpayer rescue during the 2008 financial crisis. He had upside without downside, no skin in the game. Stealth wealth is the direct inverse. Accumulate real equity, private investments, and compounding assets, while eliminating the visibility that creates targets. Visible wealth attracts lawsuits, solicitations, resentment, and during periods of social instability, the organized hostility of people who are suffering. Green put it plainly in the 48 Laws: appear as one of them in style and values. This is not modesty, it is strategy, and it connects directly to Jung's shadow work. The person performing wealth has outsourced their self-worth to the reactions of others. The person practicing stealth wealth has internalized their identity so completely that external validation becomes irrelevant. That is not a financial decision. That is a psychological one. Buffett, in his giving pledge, offered a line worth sitting with. Too often, a vast collection of possessions ends up possessing its owner. Part 6. Exploiting human predictability. The algorithm of fear and greed. In 1982, 3 economists, Werner Guth, Rolf Schmidberger, and Bernd Schwarzer, published a paper describing what they called the ultimatum game. 2 players, 1 sum of money. Player 1 makes an offer, and player 2 either accepts or rejects, in which case neither player receives anything. Classical economics predicts player 2 should accept any offer above 0. Something is better than nothing. This is rational self-interest. Offers below 20% get rejected more than half the time. People would rather receive nothing and ensure the other person also receives nothing than accept what they perceive as unfair. They burn the money to punish the disrespect, and the research identified something precise. Rejecting unfair offers runs through System 1, intuitive, automatic, heuristic. Accepting them requires System 2, which is deliberate, analytical, and slow. The fairness judge fires before you have had time to calculate what the rejection costs you. Cialdini's research adds another layer. His social proof principle found that changing just a few words on a hotel sign, noting what comparable previous guests had done, produced a 33% increase in towel reuse. Not a compelling argument, not an incentive, just the observation that similar people were already doing it. Herd behavior is not a bug, it is the operating system. Machiavelli watched this in Renaissance Florence. Green documented it across 5 centuries of historical cases. Kahneman proved it in the laboratory. Cialdini operationalized it in the field. And the conclusion across all 4 is identical. Human beings are predictable. Their fears are predictable. Their compliance triggers are predictable. And their irrationality is not random. It follows patterns. The same patterns that drove rulers in 15th century Florence drive investors, consumers, and executives today. The person who maps these patterns clearly is not operating in the same game as everyone else. They are playing chess on a board where everyone else thinks they are playing checkers. Part 7. The Mercenary Principle. Leveraging other people's dreams. Robert Greene studied classical history, worked odd jobs, and spent time writing in Hollywood. an industry that runs almost entirely on other people's dreams. In 1995, he met book packager Joost Elfers, and together they produced the 48 Laws of Power, drawing from Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, Carl von Clausewitz, and the documented lives of figures from Henry Kissinger to P.T. Barnum. More than 10 million copies sold worldwide. When asked whether he practiced all 48 laws himself, Green gave a remarkably honest answer. "Everyone assumes I practice all of my own laws, but I don't. I think anybody who did would be a horrible, ugly person to be around," and that admission points to something critical. Understanding the mechanics of influence and deploying them against everyone around you without discretion are not the same thing. What Green identified, what Machiavelli identified 5 centuries earlier, is that most people are animated by a dream, a narrative, a self-conception they want the world to confirm. Cialdini's principle of liking is relevant here. People comply most readily with those they like, and they like those who are similar to them, who give them genuine compliments, and who cooperate with them toward familiar goals. This is not manipulation in the crude sense. It is the recognition that every transaction, financial, social, or political, is fundamentally about satisfying the other party's dream well enough that they satisfy yours. The millionaire next door understood this at an operational level. They ran businesses that served real, unglamorous needs, not status businesses, not trend businesses, but operations that reliably gave people what they already wanted, extracted consistent revenue, and never announced themselves. The Sunday Times called the 48 Laws of Power the Hollywood Backstabber's Bible, and Green's response was direct. These laws, people might call them wicked, but they are practiced day in and day out by business people. He is right, they are. The only difference is whether you are the one practicing them consciously or the person they are being practiced on. 88. Killing the fairness judge. Why fair is a cage. Before Machiavelli, politics was inseparable from ethics. Since Aristotle, the ancient tradition held that power could not be discussed without discussing virtue. Machiavelli was the first thinker to decisively separate the two. He gave power its own logic, its own rules, its own calculus. And the Catholic Church placed all of his works on its index of prohibited books in 1559. His ideas survived anyway, because the people actually running governments, armies, and financial empires recognized them as accurate. What most people miss is this. Machiavelli is not arguing that fairness does not exist. He is arguing that the insistence on fairness as an absolute principle, the refusal to operate in a world that does not share your standard, is a choice, and that choice carries a cost. Most people never consciously make it. It is made for them, automatically, by their emotional reactions. The ultimatum game proves the cost. People would rather have nothing than accept something unfair, and the fairness judge fires before System 2 ever runs the calculation. The person on the other side of the table who understands this walks away with what you burned. Jung's shadow framework explains why this trap is nearly impossible to escape through willpower alone. The fairness judge is not just an emotion. It is one of the most socially reinforced parts of human identity. From childhood, you were praised for sharing, for being fair, for not taking more than your share. That conditioning lives in your conscious identity. The strategic calculus, the ability to evaluate whether a deal serves your actual interests regardless of whether it feels proportionate, lives in the shadow. Integrating the shadow does not mean becoming ruthless. It means becoming honest. It means acknowledging that you have interests, that those interests matter, and that the emotional theater of fairness has a measurable price that you have been paying without ever choosing to. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "Fortune is the arbiter of half of actions, but she still leaves the other half, or close to it, to be governed by us. You cannot control everything, But you can control whether you are making decisions based on reality or based on the emotional performance of fairness playing inside your head. The cage is not outside you. The cage is the fairness judge. And every time it fires, every time you burn a deal, abandon an opportunity, or sabotage an outcome because it did not feel fair, you are the one who locked the door. Part 9. The Fortress of Solitude. The True Price of the Crown. June 21, 1527. That is when Machiavelli died, in Florence, never having seen The Prince published. The manuscript he wrote to win favor with Lorenzo de' Medici, the man to whom it was dedicated, and who almost certainly never read it, circulated in silence for nearly 2 decades before it was printed. The person who spent a lifetime studying how to wield power died in political exile, broke and unread by the man he was trying to impress, and yet his ideas survived because they were true. The price of the crown is isolation, not as a side effect, but as a structural requirement. Talking about money changes relationships immediately and irrevocably. It introduces comparison, resentment, and expectation. People begin to see you not as a person, but as a resource. The stealth wealthy solve this by controlling information, keeping things vague, downplaying, deflecting. The filter becomes automatic. The relationships that form before people know what you are worth are real. Taleb's concept of anti-fragility applies here at the personal level. The fragile person, the one with visible wealth, high fixed expenses, a lifestyle that depends on what others think, is maximally exposed. One lawsuit, one public reversal, one moment of visible weakness, and the structure collapses. The anti-fragile person has eliminated fragile dependencies. They live below their means, not because they cannot afford more, but because optionality is worth more than performance. Now consider Viktor Frankl. In 1946, Frankl published Man's Search for Meaning, a book that would go on to be translated into more than 50 languages and sell over 16 million copies. Carl Rogers, writing in 1959, called it one of the outstanding contributions to psychological thought in the last 50 years. Frankl spent 3 years imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps, and what he observed was this. Among those who survived, the distinguishing factor was not physical strength, and not luck alone. It was the ability to find meaning, to connect with a purpose that made the suffering navigable. He concluded that a prisoner's psychological reactions are not solely the result of the conditions of his life, but also from the freedom of choice he always has, even in severe suffering. And here is why this belongs in a video about Machiavelli, Kahneman, and the mechanics of power. Everything argued across this script, stripping away the illusions of fairness, confronting the shadow, building stealth wealth, engineering anti-fragility, all of it is preparation. The question Frankl asks is, preparation for what? A life lived on autopilot, reacting to fear and social pressure and loss aversion and the approval of people who do not matter, is not just financially costly, it is, in Frankl's clinical assessment, the primary cause of neurotic behavior, the inability to find meaning because you have outsourced all your decisions to the crowd. Jung said the same thing from a different angle, integrating the shadow, choosing to own your ambition, your strategic capacity, your desire for power, does not make you dangerous. It makes you whole, and wholeness is the prerequisite for any life that is actually chosen, rather than simply performed. Friedrich Nietzsche, whose philosophy of the will to power deeply influenced Jung's understanding of the shadow, wrote what Frankl later quoted in Man's Search for Meaning: "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." The fortress of solitude is not a metaphor for loneliness. It is a metaphor for the discipline of choosing your life deliberately, managing your image, your exposure, your emotional reactions, your financial architecture. The quiet accumulation of real assets, while the world watches other people perform wealth they do not have. The crown costs silence. It costs the willingness to let other people believe you are less than you are. Most people cannot pay that price because System 1 wants to be seen. It wants confirmation. It wants to announce. Every announcement is a vulnerability. The people at the top of every system you can name are the people who mastered the discipline of not announcing. Let us bring this back to where we started. You were sold a contract. Be good, be fair, be generous, wait your turn, and the system will reward you. The system was not designed to reward you. It was designed to run on you. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513. The Catholic Church banned all of his works in 1559, and Napoleon carried his copy all the way to Waterloo, while Stalin personally annotated his. The manuscript survived every attempt to suppress it, because the people who actually held power recognized it as accurate, and the people who wanted to maintain the system recognized it as dangerous. Kahneman and Tversky published Prospect Theory in 1979, still the most cited paper in economics. Cialdini spent 3 years undercover studying compliance and published the results in 1984, making him the most cited living social psychologist in the world. Veblen described conspicuous consumption in 1899. Stanley and Danko documented the actual behavior of the wealthy across 2 decades. Taleb built a framework for surviving chaos and profiting from uncertainty. Frankl observed, in the worst conceivable circumstances, the one thing that cannot be taken from a human being, and documented what those who survived had in common. And Jung gave us the framework that ties it all together. The parts of yourself you have been told to hide are not flaws. They are the source. The shadow contains the energy. The work is to integrate it, not to unleash it blindly, but to stop being governed by the fear of it. The 9 traps covered here are not theories. They are documented, replicated, cross-cultural, empirically confirmed patterns of human behavior, and they are running on you right now. In your financial decisions, your relationships, your career, your consumption, your compulsive performances of virtue and fairness and generosity. The first step out of any trap is knowing you are in one. The second step is understanding that the people who built the trap are not smarter than you. They simply made their shadow conscious earlier. Machiavelli was right about one thing above all others. Fortune is the arbiter of half of actions, but she still leaves the other half, or close to it, to be governed by us. The half that is yours to govern. Govern it deliberately,